It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza, greetings.
Good afternoon, good morning, good day to you. How are you, Irwin? I know, I'm feeling a little mind-boggled and pertinent to our forthcoming conversation, like I just got off a race track of a day.
Esperanza just gave one of her infamous segues. Believe it or not, the two podcasters you listen to here on Our Hamptons do have lives outside of this podcast. So I know Esperanza in particular had a lot of, let's use the term, interference this morning. So life gets in the way sometimes for all of us. So, but we all understand that. But
here we are.
And she did feel like she got off a racetrack, but that's okay because we're actually going to talk about the racing that used to occur in Bridgehampton. Yes, Bridgehampton, Long Island. Okay, we know maybe its biggest claim to fame prior to present day was for Bridgehampton loam, right, Esperanza? You once marveled at a Bridgehampton potato.
Oh, well, I still do. And this is some of the richest soil in the country. But what we're going to talk about today is, amazingly, it was like the first circuit racetrack in the country also. Was that right?
One of them. And, it's really two separate stories in a sense. And that's the racetrack aspect, which we'll get to, is one. But I think almost the more incredible story, Esperanza, is, and of course, we called Bruce Springsteen, but he wouldn't allow us to use the song "Racing in the Street," for this little segue. But that was a good song.
That is a good song.
They actually raced on the streets in Bridgehampton early on. In the
early 20th century.
Early 20th century. And again, we're not a car podcast. We don't know much about that sort of thing. But apparently,
no, but we're talking 1915, to 1920. Is that
exactly? So they raced in the streets then. And I do have to, since you opened the door, listen to this. Now, remember, everybody, think of present day Bridgehampton just for a second. But here in 1915 to 1920, listen to this approximately 3-mile rectangle that started on Montauk Highway, turning left onto Halsey Lane, left onto Paul's Lane, left onto Ocean Road, and then left back onto Montauk Highway. I mean, it's
incredible. Remember that show? That's incredible.
Right. They were racing.
I'm dating myself, maybe.
Yes, I do. I remember older shows than that. Trust me. But again, as incredible as that part is, and yes, it's incredible. How about they were doing this in 1949 to 1953, road racing on the streets of Bridgehampton, and
at least the cars were a little bit, quote unquote, safer.
I would think they were right. I think they would be safer than present day, and maybe safer than 1950.
But also faster.
And good segue, because that's going to sort of lead us into how road racing ended. But I love telling you about these routes because, again, think to present day, what kind of real estate this is. It's just extraordinary. But in 1949, the Bridgehampton road racing, we didn't even get to the track yet. Forget we're not even near that right now. But in 1949, these things, the road racing resumed. We began Ocean Road. Okay, Ocean Road South. So you were going Ocean Road South, and then you were turning right onto Sagaponack Road, and then a right onto Sagaponack Main Street to a right onto Bridge Lane back to Ocean Road. That is Come on. Imagine, and again, another our Hamptons trademarked line, not ancient history. So we're going back 70 years. Okay, granted, neither of us were on the planet then, but
no, but grandparents or people that
yes,
a decade or two older than us, definitely.
Right. They were there, and so they were racing on the streets of Bridgehampton, and basically the road races ended in 1953 after a driver was killed in a practice run and 3 spectators were injured during the race. And there was also
injured. Just injured. That is incredible too.
Right. The spectators didn't die, but they were injured. I don't know all the details. I don't know if I don't know. And then there was also a very bad crash at Watkins Glen, which was a very famous racetrack, later hosted rock concerts and everything else in upstate New York. And that led New York State to ban racing on public streets. But Esperanza. Yeah. Now, remember that we spoke about this in a prior episode, the bookends, we used to call them, of East Hampton and Southampton villages.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, yeah, because people really don't, what we're talking about in between, it belongs to those bookends in a sense, right? East Hampton, Southampton. But what was in between is, you're going to say,
farmland, basically. Open space.
Through and through. Yeah.
Open space. Yes. The stereotypical, well, in 1950s Bridgehampton, the dog could lie in the middle of the road and not get run over, and you could see the ocean from 27 or from wherever.
But what's funny is that there's this account of the racing was put on hold or suspended or canceled altogether because, to your point of farmland, by one account, as due to complaints from farmers that the racing cars kicked up so much dust on the unoiled dirt roads that their potato crops became withered.
Right.
I mean, this is great. This is from a book on the racetrack, which is, as you said, a whole separate topic, but it's just priceless information about the time period.
It really is. So, and again, so just we're laying out the background, we're laying out the backdrop to all this. Point being, we've been talking about all of these places, the histories of these places here on the East End. We spoke in terms of Springs being the birthplace of abstract expressionism. Bridgehampton was a nationally known place for auto racing.
Yeah.
First on the streets, and then when they got into the actual track, just to really be clear on this, they had, and we'll get into this as we go along, we had the premier racing drivers in the world racing here. And the course was super challenging. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves here because we didn't even get to how it all started. But the point I'm making is the background of racing on the street morphed into this racing inside on a track. So now we're going to fast forward to right around this time, the early 50s, after these fatality, if you will, and the injuries on the streets and New York State banning all this. Local racing enthusiasts formed the Bridgehampton Road Races Corporation in 1953, and it was to finance the construction of a permanent racetrack. And gotta love this story now coming up, because we're going to get let's get right down to it.
Let's get to the nuts and bolts.
Let's get to the nuts and bolts of this. They ultimately were able to acquire 550 acres on what we'll try to give a geographical perspective here, Esperanza. So I'm going to ask you to help me out. Now, it's really Millstone Road.
Yeah, off Millstone. Yep.
Right off Millstone. And this basically, it extends to Noyac to the north, and then it goes all the way down into Bridgehampton to the south. But this was the area up around Noyac and closer to Noyac. And yes. I just have to read this little piece of research. This is really from the Bridgehampton. There's a group that still keeps the Bridgehampton, really the racetrack alive. Really great website. They were a great source of information on all this. And we'll post links at the, when we publish this episode. But Esperanza, property tax revealed there was just like a multitude of small lots with hundreds of different owners.
Yeah.
And so they had to do all of these searches to go back and find over generations missing deeds and heirs and everything else.
Yeah. And I bet some of them they never found, right?
Yeah.
Because this was just like wooded area where locals would go and hunt and right, and like maybe chop wood. I don't even know originally, and then I guess it got subdivided and things like that.
Yet another amazing segue.
I can't.
Okay, right. She's segueing. She doesn't even sometimes. Esperanza, I don't even know if she knows when she's
segue
segueing,
queen.
She is the segue queen. But Esperanza, in some of this research, to your point, to your exact statement that you just made, your segue, it was known as, and this is in quotation, the backwoods.
The backwoods, yeah.
The backwoods. And so these backwoods, now get a load of this. This almost pains me to say. And remember, this is early 1950s. The BRRC, Bridgehampton Road Racing Corporation, was able to amass almost 600 acres of the forested ridge north of Bridgehampton. All right, you're sitting down, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking at Esperanza.
Lay it on me.
I'm seeing her. I don't want to imply that I see her. Okay, she is sitting down. $60 an acre. $60 an acre. They had two engineers from Grumman. Remember Grumman? That was like probably the biggest Long Island employer for the longest time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they had two engineers they commissioned to draw up the circuit, and they had, I may be damaging his name, but I'm going to do it as best that I can. Ercole Colasante.
Ercole.
Thank you.
I think it's actually Hercules, by the way.
Okay.
It would be the equivalent. But anyway, in Italian.
He's described as an immigrant racer from Italy. I guess this isn't the most politically correct writing here. But anyway, that's what he was. And he fine-tuned the design literally with a bulldozer. And again, we can't overemphasize enough that this was not just some fly-by-night, let's just make a track. This was a world-class racetrack. This was an Indy 500 of the Northeast. I mean, it was a premier racetrack. And now, again, we can't. I'm gonna mention this, and this is just part of our research. Our Hamptons can't claim that this is just from what we've been reading, but listen to what some of these commentary was. It was amazing given the rush to build the track and the novelty of the idea that Bridgehampton is going to be this jewel. The clearing of the woods, and remember, this is 1953, 70 years ago, lot less, much less of a population, etc. The initial clearing created a buzz of excitement from Southampton to Montauk. And these were all small towns, so everyone was participating. Now, here's the final line. As the track reached final grading, farmers and summer people alike imagine the excitement of a pack of race cars thundering past.
Oh, it must have been so thrilling. I can picture it.
Now again, we obviously weren't there. And look, to address the 800-pound gorilla, there has been a history of sort of an us against them out on the east end of Long Island. But Esperanza, do you think it's possible that this was something that sort of united people and like they were all big?
I totally do. Yeah. I mean, I think, honestly, I think that us against them is far more accentuated nowadays than it was then. Not to say it wasn't in existence back then, but I think there was more harmony. There was more of this coexistence I, and I want to call it integration.
Yeah.
Because you had like Barney Corrigan, who was part of this group to create the track, and it was like an economic driver for the area, right?
Right.
I mean, that was, and I, you have driven past Corrigan's on Montauk Highway a million times, I'm sure.
Correct.
It's that repair shop on the north side of the road, right?
Still there, still, I guess, run by his heirs
that should
or
be
whatever.
landmarked at this point. I think it just got sold recently. I mean, as an aside, Barney Corrigan used to go pick up Howard Hughes in an airfield, like he would just land his plane in a farm field somewhere just north of Corrigan's there, and he would pick him up and bring him to the association because Hughes had a girlfriend there at a time. God, so talk about integration.
Wow. And talk about
the, visitors versus the locals.
Wow. And talk about inside dirt. Wow. And
now inside dirt, right?
That is it. That is now Esperanza sprung that on me. We always work off of a little outline, but if you've been following our Hamptons, we tend to get we get carried away and sometimes we get off track, but that's a great story. I did not know that story.
Yeah. And so Corrigan, and then you had Henry Austin Clark, who I'm sure, was sort of considered a local, but he had that automotive museum on Montauk Highway. You know about that, right?
That is correct. And thank you for that. Yet another unbelievable segue, because when they were trying to raise money for all this, his auto museum literally became a stockbroker's office for the BRRC to try to raise shares. They were offering shares for $5 a clip. Austin Clark's museum was an office, and they were also,
and Corrigan's was another one, and then the best one,
and let's not forget the best one of all, Esperanza. I'm going to let her tell us what right in front of where.
Candy Kitchen in Bridgehampton. I mean, still a place to congregate, right?
Same sign hanging on the building, that iconic sign, same sign as 70 years ago. And you could buy shares over there as well. And again, I want to really make this point. This circuit, this was European in design, and it almost mimicked some of the finest race courses in Europe. This is not an auto racing show, although believe me, we'll be tagging all the auto racers on Instagram time comes. But Zandvoort, which was in Holland, and there was another racetrack in Belgium. But you got to remember also the view. Now, the elevation, Esperanza, in this neighborhood, one of the highest.
Well, you said it's a ridge, right? So
correct.
It really has the most astonishing view over the water there, which I think is the Peconic Bay, right? I believe
it actually had 180, because it was the height. It's one of the highest sites on Eastern Long Island, and it is a ridge. And it did, to Esperanza's point, talk about it, Peconic Bay for sure. But you also had views from the track of the North Fork, Shelter Island, Sag Harbor. I mean,
on a clear day,
no question.
Incredible.
And the circuit, and it's describing this. And again, this was built to take advantage of the site. They had elevation totaling 130 feet in a bunch of different corners. I mean, they had hairpin turns, something called Millstone turn, which was like a hair-raising turn, so to speak. And
because it came right after a straightaway. Wasn't that the one?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
I do my homework.
You either do your homework,
Plus, I've been there.
Fan. or you're a racing fan, because that is exactly. There was this long straightaway, 3/4 of a mile into that turn.
I mean, full top speed, right? Picture that.
Yeah,
picture that, taking that Millstone turn after being on a 3/4 mile straightaway.
Yeah, and at the time, Esperanza, this is an amazing point that I read, and I still can't get over it. It was called in 1953, from all the racetracks in the world, this was the most difficult turn in racing.
Yeah.
But again, that's how important it is to just keep making sure we understand just how big this Bridgehampton course was, how much of a part of the heritage of Bridgehampton this racetrack was, because believe me, the end story is not as pretty as this. But
Yeah.
it was just, it was so, here, I know I'm getting very overly enthusiastic. You please excuse me and accept my apologies, Esperanza. I am sorry, but you know the way I am.
No need to apologize to me.
But
I'm with you.
Okay. But it was just, what a sense of place in Bridgehampton to have something like this. And it just amazing. But
and we're talking crowds, right?
Another unbelievable segue. She's, over the course of our Hamptons, I'm telling you, I've actually said this to Esperanza off the air. I said, I really want you to update your resume to say segwayer. I don't know if that's a word, but
it now is.
It now is. But to Esperanza's point, now the inaugural races took place September 28th and 29th, 1957. My mother was 7 months pregnant with yours truly at the time, so I was not quite here yet. But anyway, that's a story for another day. So they had a program here called Hay Bale, which was like a salute to the past, to Long Island, the cradle of American racing. Rocky Graziano, who was an old boxer, was one of the honorary starters. I mean, this was a world championship boxer. You had New York celebrities here, John Norwood, Vincent Sardi, John Weitz. They were there. And we're going to close with this because there is just so much to go on with. I'm going to leave it here. But to Esperanza's point, this is from the East Hampton Star. September 28th, reporting on this event, September 28th, 29th. The East Hampton Star reported cars parked as far as a mile away from the track entrance. Attendance estimated 30,000 people, Esperanza. 30.
When the track opened.
When the track opened.
In 1950,
57. 57. At this inaugural race, Rocky Graziano starting the Rocky World Championship boxer. Okay, this was a big sports personality.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the starters. And again, Vincent Sardi owned Sardi's restaurant in the theater district, legendary place. John Weitz, the fashion designer, I believe. But anyway, parked a mile away. And remember, this is 1950s Bridgehampton. Farmland.
Otherwise fairly, well, here we are, backwoods.
Right, backwoods.
The backwoods, but otherwise a tranquil seaside farming community with this attraction. I mean, talk about like we said, an economic driver, a tourist destination.
And attract the likes of
no other.
I'm talking again.
No, yeah.
This was
Indy one of a kind.
Daytona 5. This was one of the top racing facilities in the world. We're not talking about, this is not the little slot car thing going round and round. This was serious. There's a lot to still go to.
Yeah, we'll have to continue because there's a lot more.
But I think this is a good place to stop, because now we gave you the background. You got the history from the times when it was racing in the streets. Bruce, please call in and sing that song. And back to this, where we're at the opening day, 30,000 people in 1957 Bridgehampton. Close your eyes and imagine that scene.
Like the Golden Girls, Sophia says, picture this.
Picture this. Close your eyes. Put yourself back to 1957 Bridgehampton. 30,000 racing fans in the backwoods of a very undeveloped Bridgehampton, Long Island.
Yeah.
Great place to.
I'm just so excited to continue this.
I want you to cancel your plans this afternoon. I have to continue this right now, but all right, we won't do that. But Thank you so much.
We'll continue on side B.
Okay, we're going to continue on side B. And Esperanza, as always, thank you for such a great conversation.
All right, Irwin.
It was fun.
Until the next time.
Until the next time. Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.